If you're looking at training facilities globally, one of the hot areas that a lot of people are talking about is Africa. I think it's definitely going to be a market that's going to grow a lot more in the future.
Lots of seafarers been displaced and actually unable to be selected in the industry, and that's why there's always a big supply against the need and demand.
Where do you see the industry changing in terms of leadership, in terms of creativity, in terms of mindset in the next 20-25 years?
In 20-25 years, I think we're going to see many more countries look at maritime. I think we're going to be looking at a decarbonised industry for a start. So you're going to have a flood of engineers interested in the sector. I think the easiest one to say from an industry level, I think, is in May 2025, the IMO approved regulations for tackling abuse, sexual abuse and harassment at sea.
If you have standardized training, it's not going to change everything overnight, but it definitely creates some kind of basis that we can work towards. What are some of the real reasons why in these major labour markets today they're actually interested in becoming a seafarer? Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Seafarer Social Podcast. It's almost the end of the year, and I'm wrapping up the year with an episode with a dear friend of mine, Rob Gale, who I've known for a very long time. Rob is head of training at the IMEC. For those who don't know what the IMEC is, it's the International Maritime Employers Council. And I guess it's probably the best place to start. Can you tell us actually what do the IMEC do?
Yeah, it's a good... Thanks, by the way, for inviting me on. I think we've been talking about this for a long time.
Yeah, we have.
To put it into a nutshell, what is the International Maritime Employers Council? We are basically a membership organisation for the world's largest ship owners and operators and crewing managers. We currently have around about 315 members. Huge. We represent, if you want statistics, over 11,500 ships. Up to 400,000 seafarers that are under the collective bargaining agreements. And really, we take their feedback, we support them through industrial negotiations, industrial relations if they have issues in port state. And then on the other side, intertwined with that is the training element. So what I'm involved with is the management of a whole range of training initiatives around the globe. That includes cadet training programs. That includes monitoring high-risk areas that we establish with our partners, the International Transport Federation, the ITF. And really, we're kind of a bridged gap between your kind of historically established NGOs and really more of a link to industry and training. We have a big range of kind of knowledge on training academies that are global. So I think we're really closely connected with how cadets feel. But then at the same time, we represent the views of the ship owners out there in industry.
Nice. So I guess you're in a really prime position to help answer this next question, which is, if you're looking at training facilities globally, one of the hot areas that a lot of people are talking about is Africa. We've spoken about Africa. I think it's definitely going to be a market that's going to grow a lot more in the future. I think at the moment, some shipping companies have their eye on it. Some shipping companies are investing. What are you hearing from your members about the future of the maritime labour market in Africa?
I think it's a growing and ever-changing growing market. I think, 2 years ago, we had a cadet training program in South Africa. One of the unique benefits we have in IMEC is the ability to go and visit many countries to understand the landscape. That was conducted in 2022 with South Africa. So we were very understanding of what the landscape looked like. Now, I think what you're seeing is the success of South Africa and how many other countries within the continent are looking at how maritime can fuel and resolve some of the issues they've had. And I think the biggest thing in Africa that I see a lot of governments looking at is youth unemployment. We know that statistically, Africa is a huge population in itself. We also know that it's a young continent compared to traditional other maritime labour countries. And so I think there's certainly an avenue where a lot of governments and maritime training centres in Africa now are spotting an opportunity to be part of an ever-growing market where you have a shortage of seafarers and officers. So I think from my perspective, we've had a good understanding of what's out there in Africa. And I think if you're a shipping company and you've invested in so many different places, then Africa, I think, is one of the next ones. We've been in South Africa, we've been in Ghana, we've spoken to Ethiopia and Kenya. We very much know that there are a lot of countries vying to push more of their population into shipping.
But to be completely blunt, some outlookers may look at this labour market and say, well, it's the reason why people are going there is it's a race to the bottom, it's a cost thing, right? But what do you think is the real competitive advantages that Africa has for the maritime industry?
I honestly think, having been in South Africa, having been in Ghana, and having met the people, and I always do, and I probably say this way too much, but when you've met those people, you've interviewed them, you see a fire, you see something different. And I think when you look at the different cultures that exist in the maritime industry, I've seen, and certainly it's a number of our members in shipping companies have seen, a lot of talent there. And I think it's so easy to tar and provide a negative perspective. And, you know, whilst we represent the shippers, yes, of course, there's always a bottom line in terms of money and output. Let's maybe step back a minute and look at India and the Philippines, and the same questions arise. However, they've stood the test of time and provided quality time and time again.
But some are saying that Filipinos and Indians are getting too expensive now. And that's the reason why perhaps they're looking to external markets like Africa.
I don't see it like that. And how I would caveat that, and certainly a lot of the discussions I've been involved in, look at the COVID disruption, look at what that did to Chinese labour markets, and the numbers of seafarers in that country are ginormous. Look at the Ukraine and Russia disruption. What we've seen is lots of seafarers been displaced and actually unable to be selected in the industry. And that's why there's always a big supply against the need and demand. And I think that is an area where I think a lot of people are looking at Africa. We've done scoping exercises in Indonesia. We've done them in South America. So many countries are now looking at maritime as an option. And I think one of the other major reasons why governments are looking at it in Africa is because it's providing huge amounts of GDP for some of those countries. If you look at the Philippines and India alone.
Yeah. 17% of total GDP in the Philippines is from seafarers.
And so if you look at that from an Africa perspective, when you've got youth unemployment as a major problem, if you're able to funnel some of that into maritime, not only are you providing them with jobs, that's job security for life, not only are you providing them a high skilled environment, you're actually upskilling your country. You're bringing money into the economy. So I think it's an easy statement to make about the bottom dollar, about the bottom line. But actually, I think, as maritime has always done, is providing a lot of amazing opportunities for cultural, diverse nationalities around the globe. And I honestly, I welcome it. I think as long as the framework is in place to support cadets, and I think another major issue is berth deployments. I think if those issues can be tackled, I really see Africa being a country that can support the industry massively.
Where does this passion for maritime come from yourself? And specifically, not just the industry, but the people in maritime, because, you know, this is a very big industry. $8 trillion is what I once read is worth, you know, but the human element is something that I think only in the last couple of years has really gained, you know, there's been a magnifying glass from the humans of maritime. But that's not the case with yourself. You've been working with the humans of maritime for a very long time. Where did this passion come from, specifically from yourself?
I think anyone who knows me would know I've always been passionate. For me, I think when I came into the industry as a 21-year-old, I think you go into a cadet environment. It's stressful. It's tough. You have to study a lot. You are working crazy hours to understand all of these new ideas that you've never done before: trigonometry, science, meteorology, navigation, stability. It's incredibly stressful. And so what you do in that moment is, around the 30 or 40 people that you're in the cadet intake with, you bond. And I think you build that connection. And honestly, for me, that's kind of where it all comes from. And I think then you go into an industry and you go to sea, and it's a dangerous job. And you're on board with less people from multiple different nationalities. I think that passion's in all of us, for me anyway. And so I think that's probably where it's come from originally. I think all I want to do is support the industry and help it. and I come from a humble beginning. I am not, someone that came from a silver spoon. I came from a humble background. My father was a labourer. My mum supported us when we were children, and then she, had a part-time job in a supermarket. I am just here to help. I'm here to add value and work hard. And I don't think there's much more of a secret to it than that.
Take us back to when you were a seafarer yourself. How long were you sailing for?
So I was a cadet that started in 2009.
Okay.
And I left the industry at sea probably around 2015.
Okay.
So it's about 6 years. So I was a cadet for 3 of those, and it was about 3 or 4 years where I worked at sea. And I worked on multiple different vessel types. So I worked on, as a cadet, container ships. I then moved on to dredgers, which is basically hoovering up sand and stone, which turns into building materials for the UK. I worked on wind farm transport vessels to transferring engineers and packs to wind farms. Then I worked in towage, deep sea tugs and towing vessels out in the North Sea. Lots of different random things. And really, I would have loved to have been in the industry longer. I loved it. The problem I had was there wasn't really much of an interest while I was on contract to contract with recruitment agencies on being hired full time.
Of course.
And that's kind of what led to me thinking it might be more beneficial to come ashore, which was before kind of any of the, the cadets and that become officers.
So we were talking about your background, your history when you were sailing yourself for 6 years. You were talking about the vessel types that you went through. When I speak to British seafarers today, you hear a lot of people that are working on dredgers. You hear a lot of people sometimes working on cruise ships. You don't hear very, very much about sort of commercial vessels anymore. And before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about the UK and, how that's sort of changed over the last 50 years or so. Once upon a time, we were one of the biggest slave markets in the world for commercial seafaring. And now it's non-existent. Now, of course, many people will say, well, the labour market has moved to the Far East. But what's your thoughts on that? Why do you think the UK, especially where we are now, we're in the south coast near Portsmouth, big, in Southampton, of course, big port cities. Why do you think the UK, other than, just a labour change and cost, why do you think it's become less and less associated in the maritime industry?
Hey, it's a big question to unpack. And I don't think we have anywhere near enough time to really get into all of the details. And also, not being an expert, but there are many factors. I think the areas that I would probably suggest I'd like to focus on, I don't think the Merchant Navy has ever been something which has been really, I don't think the awareness has been huge in this country. I think the Merchant Navy in the past, I think, was something which went down from generation to generation. And I think as time has progressed, as we've become more educated and as our education has become stronger, I think there are so many other avenues where people are now funneled into. And I think if I look at that and there's someone who's always tried to support the industry in the UK and always tried to give back and going to stage shows and going to talks and places to spread awareness in colleges and schools, I think for me, the awareness is the biggest piece. We say, sea blindness is kind of the phrase that people use, where actually we have this global trade machine which provides everything for everyone. People don't really know where that comes from or where the people go. Now, I got into the industry because my grandfather told me about it. My father got into the industry because his father told him about it. And I think that's always been the case. I don't think you go to, events and shows and you hear people talking about the Merchant Navy. Now, one thing I will say, social media has been really positive in that respect. Certainly in the UK, we've seen a lot of people that have sailed now share their story. And I think not only in the UK, but in other countries, that's really boosted the overall awareness around the world. But one thing that I was always keen to try and push in the UK was more awareness at the younger level. If you look at the Royal Navy or you look at other trades or sectors, they're trying to get through to people at a very early stage. So one of the suggestions I always had, and in my previous roles, I've always been trying to push it, is a curriculum on maritime. We've had such an abundant, polarized and controversial, but also exciting industry in shipping in the UK. But when you are at school, do you ever hear much about it?
Yeah.
You might shade into the Titanic. You might go into piracy, the really old style in the Caribbean, when you might cover the slave trade. But the actual heritage of us as an exploring nation, I don't think is ever truly explored. And I think that in itself, at a key stage 5 or key stage 7 level, would make a huge difference. There's a few colleges out there that tackle it. I know on the Isle of Wight there is one that go into more detail, and I think that would ignite a lot more interest and wonder. I think if you get to young students that are looking at a career opportunity and you give them the options of being in engineering, where you're at the cutting edge of future fuel technologies, you give them the idea they can travel the world and work many less months in a year compared to your average job and earn well, I think you would find that there are people interested in it. And I think it just starts from creating that pipeline. So without covering the semantics of, other labour maritime nations and wages and contract lengths and maybe an interest in wanting to actually work on international foreign going vessels because of the more difficult conditions, I think a greater awareness would grow the pipeline. But I think we've seen some interesting developments in the UK. I think if you look at my former training centre where I did my cadetship, Southampton Solent University, Warsash Maritime Academy, they've got good numbers coming out this year. So, maybe they're being funneled more into the yacht sector and into the cruise ship sector. But it's never going to be like other maritime labour countries. The interest of working on international ships, where the grand majority of vessels are, I don't see that interest.
And is that because, sadly, people don't care enough? They just, it's not glamorous. It's not a beautiful, however many foot yacht in the Bahamas. It's not a, sexy Virgin Voyage cruise ship that, has a, beautiful captain that dances around at night time and all this, fun, lavish lifestyle, whatever. It's not that. It's something much more raw and authentic. And actually, unfortunately, we live in a world nowadays. My mother had no idea what a seafarer was until I started working in maritime. When I ran for the Seafarer charity, I struggled so much to raise money for donations because people just, people don't know. But is it a case of don't know, or is it because of don't care, or is it a combo of both? Because people will order something on Amazon. Yeah. It will come tomorrow.
Yeah.
And, because we're so used to come, quick.
But no idea where it's coming from.
But we don't think about that.
No, not at all. I think you've got many. I mean, there are so many factors. I think, yes, you want to have an honest conversation about it. You could question whether or not people are willing to roll up their sleeves and do it. There's certainly a conversation at the industry level and the ship owner level whether they're interested in paying for that level of seafarer. You have to ask that question. You have to pose that factor. But yeah, I think also, I don't think if you were to do a survey of those cadets now that are currently serving at Warsash and you ask them whether or not they want to work on the international fleet, I'd be interesting to hear what they say. I couldn't speak for them, but I would suggest that a lot of them are looking in perhaps, and I don't want to use the term cushy, and I don't want to say it's an easier life, because working at sea in any capacity is
still a hard job. Yeah, for sure.
But when I look at other maritime labour countries having significant more involvement, perhaps with India, South Africa and the Philippines, I think they are of the type and of the culture to be very resilient and put their hand to almost any position or any role on any ship. Can I say that about, and let's not just look at the UK. If you look at, American seafarers, again, the numbers are very low. If you look in Europe, if you look at Germany, Italy, and some other labour markets, I can't say the same. I can't unpack it all, but I would certainly suggest that there are certain areas where British seafarers are congregating. That's certainly my impression anyway.
So do you think then it's a responsibility of the industry to make it more appealing by investing in vessels making them a space that people want to be. Because if you look at the offshore guys, these guys working at oil rigs, super tough job. Yes, they're very well paid. But you speak to these guys and they're having like 4 or 5 meals a day, saunas, gyms, PS5s, they're like living the life while they're out there. Yes, it's super tough, right? But when they're off and they're doing stuff that's really, really fun and engaging. So do you think as an industry, maybe we should, instead of, people don't know about us, people don't care about us, and we're quite happy. Do you think we owe it as an industry to invest more into our vessels to make them a more appealing place for people to want to be?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. What I have to caveat, and certainly what I've seen at IMEC, is
the IMEC hat is on there.
I have to, of course. There is a significant level of investment that people don't see.
Yeah.
And I think it's so easy. You look at your own podcast and you look at social media and how news sells. It's the negative story that always gets the news.
I agree.
And I think what I get to see is a mix of both. Our social partners, the ITF as well, showcase some of those things. And let's be very clear, there is a dark side of the industry where there isn't that much care for seafarers. And those are the people that we need to target, to be very clear. When we look at IMEC members, they're in it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
When I look at the funding mechanisms that we provide every single year, I think in the last 6 years, there's been something like $50 million worth of investment in training initiatives. When I look at some of our other funding initiatives that are outside of specifically training things, DVDs, entertainment for seafarers, things on board, infrastructure, whether it's a swimming pool, whether it's gym equipment, those things are there. Those things are being invested in. I see that. Can there be more? Absolutely. Are we moving into a better space? I think so. When you look at what I used to have to do to speak to someone at home, when I was a cadet in 2009 to 2012, I had to pay for satellite phone cards, and I had to, I was allowed to send 1 free email a day. I think we've moved a lot more forward since then. And I think a lot of forward-thinking companies are really looking at their seafarers, and what we need to do is bring up everyone. And I think that's happening. But yeah, I think we can certainly do more.
When you speak to your cadets, and you sort of get past that surface level of, the reason why I started doing this was to support my family, to earn a good living. What are some of the real reasons why in these major labour markets today they're actually interested in becoming a seafarer?
I don't honestly believe there is a job out there that is as varied as being at sea. I think the opportunity to travel the world is something which ignites passion in everyone. It certainly did for me, and it still does today. I think I look at some of those cadets in all of the different countries, and there's challenges that they want to push themselves to do. They see growth in themselves, even in the 3 years when you're a cadet, in some cases before you even embark on a ship. And you see people that are really willing, with grit and determination, to make something of themselves. And I think the one thing that I love about this industry is there will always be a job for you if you're willing to roll your sleeves up and work hard. And I think you don't have to be the smartest. You don't have to be the most intelligent. But there's always something that you can find, whether it's as a rating, as an officer, as an ETO, or in, even if you wanted to be in catering or something else, there is something for you, and the industry will look after you. It's always that majority story. We'll always see the negative side, and I'm glad that people bring it up because it allows us to show visibility on it so that we can tackle it. But when I think about what the industry has done for me, what it's done for cadets that come and speak to me after they've qualified, you are, in some cases, bringing your entire family out of poverty, or you are creating how best to say it, right? I see cadets, when you see them at the very beginning, and their heads are looking down. They barely communicate with you, look you in the eye. Even after 1 year and then going to when they're an officer, the growth in their personality, the leadership, the skills that the industry will give you, I don't see many industries out there that can do that. And I think if you're willing to work hard, you can do whatever you want, and you can spend 40, 50 years in this industry. And when you look outside now at other sectors or other companies outside of maritime, I don't see that. I see people jumping around, and I see people going from one sector to another.
Yeah,
and I think maritime gives you that opportunity to spend your entire life doing it. And when you're done at sea, you go ashore. And those skills are all transferable. And I think that's one thing that makes the industry so amazing. And that's why I love it. And for me, when I left my law degree to look at something else because I didn't want to do it anymore, maritime was there for me. And sometimes there aren't always lots of opportunities, but maritime will give you that in any way, shape or form you choose to be, even in the UK at the time. And I think that is one thing that makes the industry special. That's certainly what I take from it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I never went to sea, had no interest in maritime or awareness of maritime, even 7-8 years ago, and just so happened to stumble across it. I'm an advertising and marketing guy, and I found myself working in the maritime industry. And I think you're totally right. Once you're in it, it's very sticky.
Can you imagine doing anything else?
No, I don't think so. It's so. I think because so many people highlight all the issues that the industry has. Actually, if you flip that and look at all the opportunities to do great shit,
yes,
that's the way I look at it.
Yes, it's a really innovating space.
Yeah,
you've got, and also, we started talking about people, but how many times do we talk and you tell me about a new person you've met and the story they have? I've got so many friends in industry that I am so close to now that some of them have come from absolutely nothing. Or some of them have come from a silver spoon, but have been able to achieve some amazing things. Yeah. You've got this cauldron of people from so many nationalities, so many backgrounds, so many different systems. No one cares. We all get along and we all make the industry better and we all do incredible things.
And I will say, from being somebody that's very much, working in the private sector, speaking to companies that are raising money to, invest into the industry by creating solutions and services or whatever. There has been a huge change, I would say, in the last few years of this sway towards more human focus. How do we create technology that actually helps seafarers? How do we create services? How do we create items that make seafarers' lives easier? And I think it's clearly a demand is increasing from the shipping companies to say, if you want to sell me something, I want to be sold something that's going to help my crew. And I'm definitely seeing that change. So I think anybody who's involved in the human side of maritime right now and seafarers themselves, it's going to see a really nice difference in the next 5 years, I'd say.
I think so. Listen, I've been more exposed to the world with IMEC. A lot of my time before that was very UK centric. When you start to sit down with shipping companies and people might, throw stones at them and say to them, oh, they're doing horrible things, blah, blah, blah. When you sit down with them and you see the people that are in those teams and in those organizations that are in satellite offices or even in the head office, there's so many people thinking about how they can make things better. You've got shipping companies that have invested in startups that are looking in so many different spaces. You've now got that race of IT and technology, which is driving phenomenal change. And I think what I would say is perhaps the generation ahead of me, the generation behind me, and the generation I'm currently in, our eyes are focused more on improving things and perhaps and whilst I can still say those that have come before us have always left the industry better than when it started. So we've got to say thanks for that. We can't just say that it was always rubbish before and now it's only getting better. You look at bullying and harassment, you look at diversity, you look at giving more people opportunities, not only around the world, but of people of different diversity, different nationalities, castes and classes. I think maritime sits at the front of that. I really don't see other sectors. And I think shipping is becoming cool. And I think social media has helped that.
That's a big statement.
I think young people like yourself are coming in and pushing it. But I do.
The video.
But I think you can honestly look at the investment that's out there, the people that are talking about it, the huge social media followings that a lot of people have that are now in the industry. I think it's becoming much more aware. And I think also because reporting in news generally has grown more niche and independent and people are out there more and putting things out there. You look at the Ever Given in the Suez Canal, a huge story. You now see big, massive collisions if you look at the Baltimore Bridge. Huge worldwide global news. And I don't think it ever was like that. So I think sea blindness is slowly eroding, but we can continue doing more. And I think we need to keep selling more amazing stories, not just the negative ones.
So building on that then, when I first joined the industry, there was a lady, I won't say her name, she said to me, what you're quite quickly realised this is an industry where the people that are making the decisions usually come under the branch of pale, male, white and stale or something like that.
Oh God.
So, and one day we will be those. Yeah, unfortunately, that is what was on the cards for you and I. But I guess the question is, and
sounds quite tragic.
You're not much older than me. I guess the question is, where do you see the industry changing in terms of leadership, in terms of creativity, in terms of mindset in the next 20, 25 years, when eventually you and I are, much more mature, much more experienced in the industry, and the sort of generation that we're from are finally sort of stepping up into that C-suite level, officer level, so on and so forth?
It's a difficult question. What I would say is, with the change now and the rapidly evolving world we live in and how everything needs to be quick and it needs to be now, I think shipping is that answer that can get things done. Now, I look at what I was doing when I was a cadet in 2009, and I look at the cadets that are now going through their paces at all of the training centres around the world. They are far more advanced in a position than I was. They're all looking at side projects, side jobs,
so true.
Looking at maritime. They're actually giving back as cadets already to candidates that might be interested in younger education levels.
Really?
I've got a bright cadet who's now waiting to go to sea, who's already created an Instagram channel and is already providing awareness of what it's like to be a cadet, to be an engineer, the projects that he's doing. He's also preparing a report on a patent pending idea. You've got these young, bright people.
Just this morning with Summit, when we did the judging panel and Chief McCoy jumped on, and he said, "It's so nice to be in this call with you, Chief McCoy, because I was watching your videos when I was
amazing, right?
So true.
And what you've got now is you're creating a much more a greater pipeline of giving back. And I think, whilst we can do as much as we can where we are, those young leaders, those young future people, they're already at conferences, they're speaking.
Yeah.
And I think, when I look at when I was younger, there were no conferences I could be invited to. So as long as we remain, as you said at the very beginning, human focused, and we give those opportunities when we have them to those that need them to elevate their voice and allow seafarers to talk at major forums, to say what's wrong, what's right, because we can't forget, there are a lot of seafarers that really enjoy their career. Yeah. Not just those that are hating the job, because people focus on that. The vast majority see it as something that's given them a huge life, an amazing career.
They need to shout out about it.
No, funny that, isn't it? Exactly. So I think we shouldn't forget that. But in 20-25 years, I think we're going to see many more countries look at maritime. I think we're going to see, we're going to be looking at a decarbonised industry for a start. So you're going to have a flood of engineers interested in the sector. When you look at ETOs and you look at graduate marine engineers that are coming from site jobs, or they're coming from being plumbers or something.
Yeah.
Coming to the maritime industry, not only the pay is amazing, but you're getting to work on something which is so transformative. Because you can't get that in aviation. You can't get that with trains. You won't get that with cars at the pace that the industry is doing. And I mean, we fire flack at the regulators, but we've really got to support them as well, because you look at the decarbonisation pledge, and yes, there's been controversy in recent times, but the fact that the IMO and the maritime industry said 2030, and we've put dates in the sand and we've put decided measures on emissions, that forces that industry to change, which creates the younger interest and the excitement. And if it wasn't for that, we might be talking in 20 years about an industry that's going in the other direction. And I only see it going up. So I like selling more of a positive story.
That's a great sales pitch. Okay, last question. So it is the 8th of December today, 2025. We are almost at the end of 2025. Christmas. It's almost Christmas. So my question to you is in two parts. What has been your biggest achievement at the IMEC in 2025? And what has been the biggest achievement in the industry in 2025?
Okay, tough one. IMEC has achieved a lot this year, and it's been a very busy year. We've created a lot of new opportunities, a lot of new initiatives. We've inaugurated a building, a huge investment in our training centre in the Philippines, a Maritime Academy of Asia and Pacific, shout them out. But for me, the number one thing that we've done is we created a cadet support helpline. It's the first of its kind in the world, in the industry, and it is centrally focused on cadets whilst they're in their academic whilst they're undertaking their academic studies. So at any time, can any cadet in any of our global initiatives, whether you're a rating, an engineer, a deck officer, an ETO, you are able to call a 24-hour.
Is that through IS1 or is that
through IS1?
IS1, yeah.
Which I think it wasn't something that was necessary. It wasn't something that everyone had to do. And we talk about the negative side in industry, but it's something we wanted to do. And I think it's something where you talk, you go to conferences and everyone talks about well-being and mental health and wellness. There are so many companies that are doing things, and I think we need to amplify that. And I think we looked at this as an NGO as being in the right place at the right time to show one of the things we can do to help tackle it. Because I think at the cadet level, if you can improve their well-being and also give them someone else to speak to, where perhaps you might have a guidance counsellor in the academy, they might want to talk to someone else. Giving the families an opportunity for the stress they have to deal with when their son or their daughter is away for so long. I think that's really powerful. So I think that's probably the best initiative we've done this year. I think the easiest one to say from an industry level, I think, is in May 2024, 2025, the IMO approved regulations for tackling abuse, sexual abuse and harassment at sea. And I think probably the most transformative thing is that we've seen a mad rush for seafarers to get their training done before that comes into effect in January.
January 1st, yeah.
We've talked about that a lot. I think that hopefully, fingers crossed, is a regulatory measure which is now being taken a lot more seriously than perhaps it always has been, which will, I think, those two things will look at improving seafarer happiness. And I think a lot of people are we're being pressured, shipping companies are being pressured, and the industry is being pressured to work on that to improve it. So there's two big things that I think is going to make
I agree. And I must say, a lot of people say a lot of things about the IMO, but I do believe that push through is going to be a huge transformation in the industry, because I think it's one of the things that was lacking and why it's such a complex area. This is a multicultural labour market, right? If you have standardized training, it's not going to change everything overnight, but it definitely creates some kind of basis that we can work towards. And hopefully it has that chain effect. I think leadership's a very important part of getting rid of bullying and harassment completely. I think leadership is so important, but I do think education is also super important.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, hey, I've worked at the IMO. I've been a flag state trying to help develop regulations, and I've been now part more of industry that's pushing the regulator to do more. They do a phenomenal job, but it's so bureaucratic, and it's bureaucratic because you've got 181 member states trying to make a decision on something. You've also got NGOs in the background that are sitting in there as well. You've got a lot of people that you need to please, and the process, albeit being slow, needs to be done properly.
Yeah.
So those pillars that we all look at, those 4 pillars, STCW, MARPOL, and the other conventions that are out there, they were crafted over time and patience so that they work. Whilst we can hate on the fact that things take a long time for them to be done, when they are in effect, I think they make a big difference. And we've seen that over time. And I think bullying and harassment and many other things will only get better. And it has to come from the IMO. That is the place for it to come from.
I agree. Rob, I could do this for hours. Hopefully we do another one at some point.
Maybe, why not?
Maybe do one in 2026.
Why not?
Yeah?
That'd be cool. It'd be fun.
We'll do it somewhere else though. Maybe not in the UK. Maybe we do it somewhere a little bit more exotic and with real seafarers around. So
that would be amazing.
Philippines, India, whatever. We'll do something cool.
Why not? Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.